to the Metal Command Podcast.
Greetings, everybody. Welcome back to the Metal Command Podcast. Tony here with you. Today, I'm here to talk a little bit about Flotsam Jetsam, and I want to talk about the fact that I think their next album could possibly be the best album they have ever put out in their career, because I do think the last two albums, in my opinion, by far, are the two best albums they have ever done. And those two albums, of course, I'm talking about Blood in the Water and The End of Chaos, which are the titles of the last two records they had put out. End of Chaos came out, I believe, 2019. Blood in the Water, let me take a look at the year on that. That came out in 2021. Anyhow, before I get into that, if you want to support the show, please hit subscribe. And, of course, hit the little bell to be notified anytime I do post a video. And follow me on social media anywhere that this video gets posted. So let's talk about Flotsam Jetsam, which is a band that I have followed for quite some time. I own every album they have ever put out. And I've been probably following this band for the better part of 30 years. And I've always thought that Flotsam Jetsam, for me, was very, very up or down, depending on the album that came out. You know, and I think that this upcoming album is going to be the first time where I can go and say, I love 3 albums in a row. And it will probably be me saying, I love the last 3 albums the best. Now, most people know Flotsam Jetsam as the band that Jason Newsted used to play in before he joined Metallica. And many people consider Doomsday for the Deceiver as, you know, and No Place for Disgrace as 2 real classic albums. And I can't really argue with that. I think Doomsday for the Deceiver is a phenomenal record. It's a classic record, but I just don't think anything they've done has come even close to the caliber of the last 2 records, The End of Chaos and Blood in the Water. I just don't think anything's come close to those. Now, my favorite album up until The End of Chaos came out was the album called The Cold, which I think was a great record. I still think it's a great album, and it's a top 5 album for me, you know, in Flotsam's discography. But when I look at their career, it's kind of like I think to myself, you know, they have their own sound. Like when you hear a song by them, you know it's them. But it's been up or down. Like I love the first 2 albums. You know, then you get into like When the Storm Comes Down, which I think is not very good. Quattro is obviously better. I really did like the album Drift, and I also liked the album called High, which came out both came out back in the mid '90s. But then you get into like, I'm looking at these albums now, and you know, you get into albums like My God, or you get into albums like Unnatural Selection, and it's just been such a hit or miss discography that, you know, it's kind of like, you know, they've always been a band I kind of listen to every once in a while, but they've never really put out that album where I'm like, wow, this is completely awe-inspiring. And they did that probably for the first time, and they came close with the Cold, which was a good record. But I'll be honest, folks, The End of Chaos blew me away. I was not expecting that album to be as good as it was. And then Blood in the Water, of course, was a phenomenal follow-up to that. So what changed? And I'll be honest with all of you. One of the things I think changed is that they did keep a lot of their signature sound. But what it feels like to me, and what the music feels like to me, is that you have just a little bit of melodic power metal sort of mixed in with their own brand of thrash. And that, to me, is what really changed. Because the songs are catchier. The songwriting's definitely, in my opinion, a lot better, but there's a lot of hooks in like a lot of the choruses and a lot of the songs, and it almost feels like you took a little bit of power metal and mixed it in with the brand of thrash metal they've always pretty much played, or the brand of music they've always played. And I think that formula is what really has propelled their music so much higher. I mean, everything's a much, you know, the songs are a much higher caliber than I think they've ever done, to be honest. Now, those of you out there who will say, oh, that you shouldn't say that because, you know, Doomsday for the Deceiver, nothing's going to top that. And there are people that say that. I'm somebody that likes to move forward, and I think Doomsday for the Deceiver, again, it's a top 5 album for me by Flotsam, but these last 2 completely blow it away. And it's interesting because I had their drummer, Ken Mary. Now, many of you know Ken Mary from playing in a lot of great bands over the years. Obviously Fifth Angel, House of Lords, played in Alice Cooper. I mean, Ken's played in a lot of great bands, and he has played on a lot of great projects. And, this is what he had to say about the last two Flotsam Jetsam albums that he played on. Check this out.
But I do agree with you. I think on the Flotsam stuff, two of my favorite albums are the last two albums. And it's hard to say because you were involved in it. But I mean, as a fan, like I listen to those records in my car for fun, which I can't tell you, I've played on a bajillion albums, and there's not a lot of albums I would put in my car and listen to just for fun. Because usually when you're done with them, you've heard them like, 500 times. And, you're just done, you don't want to hear them ever again. And, the Flotsam stuff, the Fifth Angel stuff, I mean, I still enjoy listening to this. So,
yeah,
from my opinion, I totally agree with you.
And that was Ken Mary talking about the last two Flotsam and Jetsam albums, which, of course, are the albums he did play on. Now, when he talks about the fact he likes to listen to them as a fan, folks, I know a lot of you out there are going to say, like, well, he played on it, so of course he's going to say that. And, there is some element of truth that people do say that. However, I can tell you as a musician, and a lot of musicians will tell you, when you are highly involved in a record where you're living and breathing that album nonstop for, say, like a year, you kind of get sick of it, and you don't want to go back and listen to it right away. And I truly believe he's sincere in saying what he's saying, because I'll tell you what, I agree with him. I agree with the fact that these, in my opinion, I think these are the two best albums they have ever put out. And if you go and look at the reviews and look at the comments from people on social media, there are lots of people that really weren't into this band until the End of Chaos came out, and it blew a lot of people away. A lot of people are like, man, I didn't like much by these guys until that album came out. And there's an element of truth to that, because people that I personally know who didn't really care for them too much really love these last two albums. Now, they have 3 songs that came out so far to preview off the album, and it's not uncommon for bands to basically, and I'm going to go list these songs out for you. It's not uncommon for bands to put out and promote the album by putting out 3 or 4 songs. So the 3 songs in question, which I do want you guys to check out, and I will put into the show notes: Burn to My Bridges, Primal, and I Am the Weapon. All 3 of these tracks, in my opinion, are phenomenal. Every bit as good as the last 2 records or anything else the band has done in its past. And in some cases, I like these 3 songs a little bit better than what they've done. But again, this is a band who's kind of peaking musically very late in their career. Sometimes that happens, right? So, folks, if you've ever written this band off, if you've ever written them off and said, yeah, I've never really cared for them, if you haven't heard the latest stuff they've been putting out, the latest music they've put out for the last couple records and these 3 new songs, I highly recommend you check them out. In all seriousness, I really love this band, especially their last 2 albums. And again, for me, most of the discography has been very hit or miss. But as far as these last 2 records and what I'm hearing that's going to be coming out on the new album, I mean, this upcoming album is probably going to be album of the year material, at least for me. So with that being said, that's all I have for you. Thanks for watching. Again, if you like what you see and hear on this podcast, don't forget to give the video a like, subscribe to the channel, hit the little bell to be notified anytime I do post a video. And of course, if you see this video or podcast on any other form of social media, please follow me there. Thanks for watching. Stay metal.